Canada is the second largest country and the country with the longest coastline on the planet. It is so big that it has a density of only 5 inhabitants per square kilometer. And that's because even though Canada has the largest population centers near the border with the United States, it also has thousands of islands, some the size of Spain, but with a population similar to tiny Nauru. Are you interested in what's up with Canada's islands? Then stick around, so stay until the end of the video. This video is dubbed and optimized in 6 languages. Thanks to Brave, you want to show your content to a larger audience without much effort. I'm doing it to get more visibility thanks to Brave. With the link I leave in the description, get a 20% discount. To begin with, we could say that Canada is not just a country with islands, but to a large extent a continental archipelago, thanks to its 9 points. Out of 9 million square kilometers of surface area, almost 2 million square kilometers are concentrated in its islands, which is 4 times the size of Spain. Canada has about 52,000 in total, making it the 4th country with the most islands, only behind Sweden, Norway, and Finland. The most striking thing is that very few of them have more than 100,000 inhabitants. The only one with more than 1 million is the island of Montreal, which is part of the Hochelaga Archipelago, located at the confluence of the St. Lawrence and Ottawa rivers. Interestingly, Montreal is also one of the smallest islands, with 499 square kilometers. It is home to almost 2 million people, and the city of the same name is also the most populated in the province of Quebec. Yes, the one where they speak French. Heading east, we have Vancouver Island, named after the explorer who sailed along the northwest coast of North America. And interestingly, it does not contain the city of the same name. Yes, Vancouver City is on the mainland. Actually, the island is home to the city of Victoria, the capital of the province of British Columbia. Moving now to the northeast, we have the island of Newfoundland, the largest Canadian island outside the Arctic. This would be the first place where Europeans arrived. Careful, I said arrive, not establish your viceroyalty and tell the Catholic monarchs about it. In the settlement of L'Anse aux Meadows, Vineland would have been established, the territory discovered by the legendary Leif Erikson, just as it was described back in the 17th century. Newfoundland would be the first English settlement in present-day Canada, and interestingly, also the last territory in the country to be abandoned. In fact, it was an independent country from Canada, known as the Dominion of Newfoundland, which only recently decided to join. Prince Edward Island, also on the eastern coast of the country, is the smallest province in Canada. However, its capital, Charlottetown, is known as the birthplace of the Canadian Confederation. That is, it's where the idea of the country was born. Finally, Cape Breton Island, which is part of the province of Nova Scotia and where the famous Cabot Trail is located. Named in honor of the Genoese explorer John Cabot, the first European to reach the mainland of North America. So far, we've only seen the tip of the iceberg, the populated islands of Canada that everyone knows and where you don't freeze from the cold. Let's move to the Canadian Arctic, where the islands aren't measured by their population, but by their overwhelming vastness. Starting with Baffin Island, which, with 507,000 square kilometers, is the 5th largest island on the planet. Baffin has a larger area than Spain, but has a population of 13,000, similar to that of the tiny island of Nauru. Despite its small size, Baffin has 1 million residents. Let's move to the Canadian Arctic, where islands, overwhelming vastness. Let's move to the Arctic, where islands, are measured by their overwhelming vastness of 217,000 square kilometers, larger than Guyana or Belarus. Let's move to the Arctic, where they are known not for their population, but for their overwhelming vastness. Despite requiring very few administrative processes, the enormous island is divided between the provinces of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories. Why and for what purpose? No idea. I don't see the point either. This sparse population is perfectly understandable, since you wouldn't move to a place with temperatures below 40 degrees Celsius. No, at least I wouldn't, since last week I didn't even want to go outside when it was -3 degrees. Here in Munich, and going further north, we have Ellesmere Island, nicknamed the Fortress at the End of the World, with 96,000 square kilometers. It's about the same size as Kyrgyzstan or Senegal. But if people don't go to Victoria, they're even less likely to go to Ellesmere, where temperatures can drop to -50 degrees Celsius. At its tip is Cape Columbia, the northernmost point of Canada, about 796 kilometers from the North Pole, Ellesmere. We can also find the Allard Military Base, considered the northernmost permanently inhabited human settlement on Earth. Despite their low population density, the Canadian Arctic islands have great value, especially after the melting caused by climate change. This allows for the discovery of new mining and oil resources, and new transportation routes are also being created. The problem is possible conflicts with its Arctic neighbors, the United States, Russia, and Denmark. Through Greenland, Canada enters the geopolitical arena of the Arctic conflict. In fact, the United States does not recognize Canada's full sovereignty over the Northwest Passage, even though it is Canadian internal waters. You know, they own Alaska, and at some point they overlap. And in fact, there is also a dispute over the maritime border with the Canadian province of Yukon with Russia. There is also an overlap of the continental shelves at some points, where it is estimated that there are large resources that will continue to be discovered as the ice melts. Finally, with Denmark, there was the dispute over Hans Island, and since we're talking about islands, let's finish with this one, located between the province of Nunavut and the Greenlandic municipality of Ilulissat. Its surface, its population, 0 humans and maybe a couple of penguins. The problem is right on the maritime border, which is why it was the subject of dispute between Canada and Denmark for decades. In fact, in 1973, the Whisky War began when a Canadian company investigated the island. In 1984, the Danish Minister of Greenland sent a helicopter to the island, leaving a flag and a bottle of whiskey. Canadian soldiers did the same a few years later and placed the Canadian flag. And although there was never an official confrontation, I mean, who would fight over a deserted island in the middle of the Arctic? The Whisky War lasted until June 2022, when both countries decided to split it in two, to teach Russia a lesson, who in that same year began its invasion of Ukraine. Interestingly, this event gave both countries a second land border, since before this, Canada and Denmark only bordered the United States and Germany, respectively. Anyway, these have been the facts about the islands of Canada. As you can see, unlike the islands of Russia, which we talked about in this video, some of the Canadian islands do have greater demographic and historical significance, while others, well, give us interesting facts to entertain ourselves, like a base just a few kilometers from the North Pole or a war over whiskey. What other interesting fact do you know about the islands of Canada? Don't forget to leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. Also, I'm leaving my social media links in the description, and in case you want to watch the new videos at the premiere and have more interaction with me, your donations on Patreon, Un Hermanito Net, or channel memberships are welcome. See you next time.